Hey everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Bastock and Bachelor Bullshit Busters. I'm Simon Batchelor,
I'm Adam Bastock.
and this week we are going to be answering the age-old question of how much should I spend on SEO? This is a question that we get asked a lot, and it is a question that is very difficult to answer. So we've decided that we're going to dedicate a whole episode to answering it, and we're hopefully going to help you understand a little bit more about what is behind the cost of SEO, what sort of level you should be investing at, and why that level of investment is required for the kind of thing you're going to be getting back. We're not going to be sort of particularly recommending any particular service or a specific amount of money that you should be spending, but I think it's more of a discussion around why you should be investing the sort of different levels you need to with different business types. So, Adam, in terms of the sort of I was going to say width and breadth of SEO charges. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen everything from like $25 on Fiverr up to about 50 grand a month I've seen on one website, which helps no one really, because ultimately, to buy SEO, both of those things are SEO. So do you want to give us an idea maybe of some of the sort of lower end of the market things that you've seen that are available and what sort of thing they're providing?
Yeah, of course. I think 50 grand a month is probably my recommended amount to spend with me on a monthly basis. That is kind of the lower end of the market, of course. No, I think it is such a wide ballpark, and I think unpacking the reasons why is really important. So the lowest kind of fees that I see are around £99 a month, and that is basically going to be buying you some nonsense. It's going to be someone buying basically an automated tool that will just scan the website, check out a report, and they're paying a tool. They might be paying, say, £20 a month to white label that tool, which then gets emailed to you. There isn't any kind of analysis or action on it, and I think that is really what you end up paying for, or should be paying for, essentially. All of the SEO tools that are out there, and there are many, and there are always more coming onto the market claiming they're the best, they're there to kind of help automate someone like my job to a certain extent, where I use a SEMrush account and I will run kind of audits through that. I will then take that audit and spend my time kind of analysing that and then feeding back to the client of what that actually means and what is impactful. An example we kind of gave before we started recording was that one of these reports might come back saying that, say, 10,000 of your pages have got too much meta description text on them. That is something that's technically true, and that might generate 100 pages of kind of alerts from one of these tools. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be revenue impacting to your business. It isn't. It is something that should be SEO optimized, but it's not what I'd consider a kind of a priority action unless your site is already in a very good state of affairs. So, in terms of what you can pay for, I think a lot of it is not translation, but kind of understanding and experience and priority of kind of what to fix. In the same way that if you're hiring an architect, they're going to be giving you a very specific kind of set of skills that help you make a faster decision on what is appropriate for you. In a way that if you bought kind of an off-the-shelf kind of home build, you wouldn't be able to customize it that much. It's a poor analogy because I can't get much further with it, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So
I think that does summarise it really well, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are selling a very basic SEO service, and essentially what they're selling is an SEO audit. And as you say, they're either using a white labeled tool, which means they're just sticking their logo on the front of another tool, and all that tool is doing is scraping your website, finding some errors and giving you a report. And the thing is, if you've got maybe a 10, 15 page website, once you've done that report once, you really don't need to do it again. Because once you fix those errors, you don't need to know that those errors remain fixed for 10 months. You don't need a year's worth of report saying there's nothing to fix and then someone saying, oh, well, that's a good thing. It means the SEO is working. What you then need to do is look at, well, how do you rank? And that becomes different. So that's where you're actually looking at how your website's performing in the search engine results. And for that, you need a much more expensive tool. So to get that kind of report, you're then looking at like hundreds of pounds a month rather than £100 a month. So I think that is an important differentiator between the sort of technical SEO report that is necessary to make sure that you're not making some blundering errors. But actually, once you've fixed those errors, for most people, you only need to do that once in a blue moon just to check that nothing's changed. What you then need to look at is, well, actually, my site for this key phrase is appearing here in the search results, and maybe you want to compare that to your competitor. And then you can work out, well, actually, I need to make some more content around this. And SEO then becomes much more about content generation and search engine performance, as opposed to this kind of technical level, which I think people get really bogged down in at the early stages. Having said that, with an e-commerce site, for example, if you've got continually changing products, or you're adding hundreds of products at a time, then doing that monthly technical report is really useful, because it can spot the blind spots that you would just never see as a human. So for example, if I said, okay, you need, let's say each of your pages creates a variant page, and you've got 100 products and there's all these variants, you may have a 2,000 or 3,000 page website for a small e-commerce business.
Easily.
You can't be possibly expected to check every single H1, every single meta description, every whereas an automated crawling tool like that the lower end of that service is offering is really good, because that is going to really quickly say, you've got these loading errors, you've got this page that hasn't been redirected, here's urgent things that need to be fixed. So there is definitely a time and a place for that technical SEO report. And I would say, if you are technically minded, if you built your own e-commerce website, then you should probably look into buying one of the tools yourself, and just use that to monitor it on a technical level. You could use something like SEO Moz is pretty good. It's quite expensive, but it is good. And from a technical point of view, it's definitely going to help. The thing is, very quickly, you hit the end of that sort of, this is wrong, do that, this is wrong, do that. And once you've done it all, those tools then go into very deep water. And that is where you need someone who's been doing it for years, who knows what they're talking about, who can say, right, okay, you need a strategy. You need to be thinking about your long-term search performance. And I think that's where someone like you, Adam, comes in, because you're taking it beyond the fixing of the car. You're doing the long-term tuning. You're doing the long-term performance optimization.
I think that's always the thing I try and not sell in, but is the kind of concept I try and educate people on, is that SEO always has to be put kind of at the centre of the business to a certain extent, because understanding search data and what people are searching for informs so much more than just the SEO. It will inform what content you can write on emails, or what content you can write on social media and share, and what blog posts you can write, and even through to like e-commerce sites. A lot of the time that the kind of the monthly retainer work that I have is in constantly researching the market to see what new products e-commerce clients can bring in, and what opportunities there is out there where competitors might be missing a trick. The idea being that we're taking then search data to inform a business strategy. It's not about SEO as this kind of one bucket of SEO, it's done thing, as we kind of famously say. I think if you are looking at how much to spend on SEO as kind of a question, and you're talking to a lot of different vendors or different agencies or freelancers, the thing you want to be asking them is, what is the action that you are going to get from them at the end of every month?
Yeah.
If they can't answer that question, then move on. So they should be able to say, right, okay, at the end of each month, we give you a list of things that are in priority order that you need to fix on your website. That might be for the first 3 months or so, and then after that, they need to be moving on to the next set of issues and the next set of questions. So in my mind, I'm not sure how correct this is in the grander world of things, but I always think of SEO almost like a wheel, where there's a technical thing that you do first, you then move on from that, and you kind of might look at content. Then after that, you might look at something kind of slightly different. So you might be looking at kind of new opportunities in the market, or kind of new areas to move into. And then you might be coming back around to technical again, where you then go, well, actually, we've now created all of this content. We now need to review the technical side of things to make sure that is all optimized as well as it can be in terms of internal linking and making sure there's no typos or errors or whatever. And then once that's done, you go back to content again and go, well, actually, we're now in a position where the market's changed slightly. What new content can we create? And, it's definitely a cycle, and that's why it has buy-in from so many different departments and in your business, or if not departments, if you're not that big, just different kind of thought processes.
Even just
of
different people in the business.
Yeah, exactly. Of just, well, how can SEO help inform your Google Ads strategy, or how can SEO help inform your kind of event strategy or your PR or anything like that? So
I think there's definitely a lot of factors that it can bridge in a business. There can be a lot of different people that need to be involved, especially if you're in a small team of maybe 10, 15 in the company. But I
Yeah.
think one of the things that people often get confused in, like even just listening to you describe those sort of 3 processes you go through and you loop round, that's a lot of work each month to be thinking about that. And I think people underestimate actually how much work there is and how much expertise there is going into each of those stages, and working out what's worth doing and what's not worth doing. Because with a big site, if you've got maybe 5,000 pages on a big e-commerce site, there's always a list of stuff to do, but it's
Yeah.
like what's actually going to end up in more conversion, what's going to end up with more orders. And even if we flip that round to a small site, thinking about just like a lead gen site with maybe 10, 15 pages on, yes, the list might not be quite so long. So, an amateur SEO agency or someone who's just using an automated report is going to run out of stuff to do really quick. And if you're
Let's look at
tied into
charging
a
you.
6-month contract, they're going to be like,
Yeah.
well, we've got a graph. Look at the graph. Look at the graph. Isn't it good? Look, the thing's gone up. But it's like,
Yeah.
what they should be saying is, okay, well, actually, your competitors don't rank really well for this keyword. They've got nothing on their site that answers this question. So actually, if you make some content about that, you're going to outrank them. And they should be doing that kind of report and using software that is expensive. I mean, don't be afraid to ask the agency what software they're using. I mean, if anyone asks us what software we're using, we tell them,
Yeah.
because ultimately, if they go and look that software up, they're going to be like, how much is that software? It's not cheap, but the thing is they get access to it with an expert who's interpreting it. And like I said earlier, you could use SEMrush, you could use SEO Moz, 2 big tools out there, but you're going to be paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month for the privilege of that. Whereas actually, for probably about the same, for maybe £400-500 a month, you could get access to both of those tools and an expert to tell you all about it, because there's economies of scale there. Obviously, as an agency, we can afford to buy a big SEO Moz account and
Yeah.
have all of the bells and whistles features, because we've got lots of clients paying for it. But if an individual client was to go to that, not only would the tool be really expensive, but they'd get maybe a 100-page report every month that mean that they're going to spend hours and hours, if not days, trying to decode every month. Whereas because we look at those reports all day, well, not all day, every day, but on a regular basis, we're like, oh yeah, well actually, that's really obvious. We'll do that this month. That's definitely what we're going to do. And and I think also the other thing is those reports, they are easy to interpret wrong if you look at them. Like if you come at them with a certain lens, you will see them in a certain way, and you can always interpret SEO data to be doing well. And that's why there's so many SEO agencies out there, because genuinely anybody can send me any report from Moz, from SEMrush, doesn't matter. I can spin it to make a graph go up on any data,
Yeah, exactly.
because you can always trick data. However, if you've got a strategy in place and you know what you're doing and you've already agreed what the goals are, then you can't hide the data. So what I'm saying is, as a business owner, you can always twist the data to make yourself feel better.
This
Whereas,
is probably why the SEO industry has got such a bad name, is because of
Yeah.
the graph twisting, which
exactly.
I don't do.
Whereas, well, no, and I think it's something that you can be open with, because if you don't rely on the graph as your main metric, if you rely on, well, how many sales have you had?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the one.
You need to pin it.
If you want to find out whether your SEO agency know what they're doing, ask them to measure that. And a good SEO agency will be like, yeah, fine. That'll be the measurement of success. A bad SEO agency will just go mad, go red and run out of the room, because they don't they don't want to be accountable. So ultimately, what I'm saying is, if you as the business owner look at your data with a certain lens, you can make it read what you want to read. Whereas an expert can be objective and say, yes, your vanity metric of page visits has gone through the roof, but actually your sales have gone down. So that change you've made is getting you loads more traffic, but everyone's bouncing. It's not the news you want to hear, but it's what you need to do to keep your business running. And that's the real thing, I think, is having that external help can be really valuable, especially to a business owner who's head down in the business all day. You don't have time to interpret the data properly. You need someone who can look at it with a bigger business hat on.
And I think, just going back to the question of how much does it cost, or how much do you spend on SEO, I think that's where it really comes down to it, is that you have to be spending enough to make sure that you're paying a human to read a report and just distill it down into information that you can then make an action on. That's kind of the key amount you need to focus on. Depending on the agency, depending on the freelancer, that value is going to change. So it might be, between £30 to £300 or £3,000 an hour, depending on kind of who you're talking to. But no matter who they are, it can't be so little that they are just sending you a automated blank report and they're not talking to you as a business owner.
Yeah, agreed.
They have to be talking to you kind of as a partner almost, rather than just a direct kind of client relationship, I think. Or at least that's how I like to kind of approach it, where it's going, well, actually, let's look at your business and your business goals, and then let's align SEO to that. Align's kind of a horrible word that is probably a bit bullshitty, but it's about matching what you're doing at a business level to what the customers are searching for. That's the whole thing with SEO. Yeah. And if they can't do that in a very clear and objective way in terms of their proposal, then I would be seeking another person. But ultimately, that is why it costs money. That's why it's not cheap. And as you say, like, in the interest of transparency in terms of the tools that I'm using, I use SEMrush, which is about £250 a month. I use Keyword Finder or Mangles, which is another about £70 a month, I think. And I'm just looking at adding some more in. So there's Content King, which is a similar thing where it scans the website constantly for changes. And that's about another £50 a month, I think. So
yeah.
And that's
SEO
ignoring any kind
is
of
like $500, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I'm not even on the top package on SEMrush because I think that's the middle one. You can go up to about I think
SEMrush goes into the thousands if you, depending on the pages and the terms, it goes really high. I think this is the thing. It's like, because a lot of the tools are scaled depending on keywords and number of pages, because obviously the tool has more work to do. So sometimes there will be a surcharge on top of services because it actually physically costs more to the consultant or the agency to use these tools, because you're spinning up loads more servers in order to run this, crawling the database and all this. There is sometimes genuine added cost in it. It is a bit of a funny sort of thing to get your head round. But ultimately, I would say if you're sat on the other side of a table or a Zoom call from an SEO consultant who is trying to whiz bang you with graphs and say, like, look, I've got graphs and they go up every month and all my clients have got 10,000% increase and da-da-da-da-da. And then you say, okay, brilliant. And they don't ask you what is the metric you're measuring for success, then they're just selling you a graph. And if you don't think that they understand what they're selling, then they probably don't know, they're just an automated report. And I know this sounds a bit harsh, like maybe you disagree, but I think a lot of people out there they're just selling the graphs, and it's why SEO has such a bad name. But actually, there's a lot of people out there who genuinely do know their stuff and are really good and are happy to just have a chat about it and can explain to you in, half an hour, what it is that they're doing, how it works. And they'll always be transparent about what they're using, and they'll always be upfront about saying, this is the metric I want to work with you and help you improve. And if you can find someone like that, then you've found the right person. And yes, if they cost maybe £100, £200 a month or a year, whatever, more than the next person, as long as you're happy that you think you're going to get what you want because the metrics are agreed and you think they get it, then give them a go, because that £100 you're looking to save is going to cost you way more down the line.
I think that's the thing. It's because SEO impacts for you not for the next month or so. It will impact for you for the next 5 years. That's why it's such a brilliant channel for return on investment, but why also there's not much point going cheap with it, because it just means that you're going to put yourself, you're kind of stifling your growth 5 years down the line. Whereas if you put slightly more in now, that will kind of extrapolate a lot further later on. And I think another kind of test for any kind of consultant that you're working with would be, if it's not going well, why? And if they can kind of satisfactorily explain why things aren't going to your kind of desired outcome, I think that's a good test as well. Because I've got clients where growth hasn't been as quick as we wanted it to be. It's not been as kind of amazing turnaround case studies, but the reasons are complex and varied because of the actions that the company has or has not taken over the past 5 years. And it's about looking into that as well and going, well, actually, the reason why is because you've not built any links for the past decade. You kind of sat on this little island of kind of isolation. So I think it's really important to understand they should be able to explain why things might go well or why things haven't gone well as well. It's about that explanation part and being able to kind of pass the information rather than just hand you a graph or a kind of scary looking table of requests for your developer to implement. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think how much does it cost? It depends how much you want to spend on it. It's a big question. It's not quite as clean cut as something like Facebook ads or as Google ads, where you can
Yeah.
literally scale it. So I think you really have to think about your appetite for kind of spending, but also the SEO agency or kind of consultant should be able to not predict how much it's going to go, but do kind of kind of a validation. It's not the right word. There's another word there, but a viability audit on it to say, well, actually, look, there's tens of thousands of people searching for these products. If we can make it in the next 12 months, you're going to see a return on investment above and beyond what my cost is over that year, even if that cost is quite high.
Yeah.
And that's something that they should kind of be building into any kind of proposal, or at least if you ask them, is it worth it? They should be able to answer honestly.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So, as always, if you've got any questions about it, or you think you are currently stuck with an SEO person who may just be selling you a graph, then do get in touch and we'll take a look at it for you and help you find out whether you are in fact just being sold bullshit or whether you are in fact being sold the world's best SEO. Who knows? If you've got any questions or suggestions for other topics you'd like us to cover, any requests you'd like us to talk about on this podcast / video on YouTube, then do get in touch. And as always, do give us a subscribe on the channel you are currently listening or watching on. And you can also find us and take us with you on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, other such podcast outlets,
all
and
the
of
podcast
course, YouTube. So do give us a follow there. But yes, until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.